local HSJCC is to engage in joint cross-sectoral planning, coordination, and individuals with complex human services needs, which may include but not limited to those living with mental health issues, substance use concerns, and or behavioral dependence, or neurodevelopment and neurocognitive disabilities, including developmental disabilities and dual diagnosis. Um, Also, who's involved or at significant risk of being involved with the criminal justice system. There are four locals, HSJCC. We have the West Toronto, North York, downtown Toronto, and Scarborough. Each local HSJCC is responsible for working together to address local needs and reporting to the Toronto Regional HSJCC to help inform system planning at a regional and provincial level. If you're interested in joining the committee, please respond in the chat box with your email, and our coordinator, Dominica, will contact you and follow up accordingly. We ask at this time that you mute yourself and turn off your videos. If you have questions, please write it in the chat box, and there will be question and answers at the end of the presentation. Right now, I just want to introduce that the presentation is applying and qualifying for Ontario Works, Ontario Disability Support Program for homeless and precariously housed clients. We have with us today Randy McLin. He's a paralegal community legal worker with Scarborough Community Legal Services. His area of practice mainly consists of assisting clients who have been denied ODSP due to medical qualifications to appeal their denials. He has over a decade of experience assisting homeless and precariously housed people, having worked in harm reduction, street outreach, shelter, and community health centers before returning to school to become a paralegal. Today's learning objective will be learn about qualifications and application process for both Ontario Works and ODSP, how clients' housing status may affect their eligibility and program available to assist homeless clients with applications, and how to advise and assist clients with respect to their rights and responsibilities with Ontario Works. So I'll turn it over now. Um, I'll turn it over now to Randy. Oh, sorry. I also wanted to just let you guys know that um, if everyone's, well, you guys we're asking you to turn off videos for whoever is just joining and to mute. And Randy, you're consenting for this session to be recorded.
Yep.
If everyone is okay with this, everyone has to be basically okay with this. That's why we asked for the videos to be turned off. Will you be using PowerPoint slides? And we'll be using PowerPoint slides, and we'll start from now. So I want to introduce Randy. Thank you for coming. And yeah, welcome everybody.
Yeah, and for I see people in the chat, yeah, I will share the slides of people when I'm done. So there's a lot of information I'm going to be throwing at you, so it's good to have that written down. Yeah, so today's presentation, as we said, is about applying and qualifying for Ontario Works and or the Ontario Disability Support Program for homeless or precariously housed clients. So some of the information, I wasn't aware this is going to be a province-wide presentation, so some of the stuff I'm talking about will be specific to Toronto in terms of some services and benefits, but other municipalities have similar things, and I'll be sure to let you know what does and does not apply province-wide, but there's just a few things. So have there. So yeah, so this is the overview. So we're going to be talking about the process of applying for OW and ODSP, We're going to be talking about the rates for benefits, what people are receiving in terms of cash, but then also the different benefits that are available to people when they're on OW or ODSP. And we're going to be talking with rates to how housing status affects the money that people receive. We're also going to be talking about earnings, if people are working, how that may affect their ODSP, and then what to do if you disagree with a decision that OW or ODSP has made, and then lastly, just some tips and strategies for communicating and dealing with ODSP and OW. So first, how to apply for OW. So one of the best ways is to apply online. You can see the link there if you're assisting someone. Now, we know that not everyone has access to internet services, so there are a couple other ways that people can apply. The first is they've now moved for Ontario Works to kind of a centrally located call center to deal with intakes that's province-wide. So there's the number for that. And people can also apply in person. So they can apply at their local office by speaking with an intake worker. They'll need to schedule an appointment and bring identity documents and verification documents. So that might be things like proof of their rent, proof of their bank accounts, that sort of thing. But when they talk with an intake worker, they'll tell them what to bring in. Now, they may decide for other reasons we talk about that they'll be told that they're not eligible to apply for certain reasons. That just because OW is saying that doesn't mean that that is necessarily the case. And unfortunately, a lot of people will just be like, oh, well, they're telling me I can't apply, I guess I can, and then they give up. But there's situations where if that happens to a client that you're supporting, I would, press the client to get it in writing why they're being denied benefits, because there is, and then contact with a local community legal clinic about that. But just don't necessarily take no for an answer, because there's different reasons why they might be saying that. Yeah, so the same kind of thing here. So if they're applying for OW or ODSP and they're told verbally they're not eligible, they usually can't appeal, but or sometimes they'll try to convince the person to just withdraw their application. But in that case, have the person insist on getting an appointment, insist on completing the full application, and then appealing when denied. Once again, it's important to have the decision in writing. If they're still refusing to provide a decision in writing, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're barred either. Lots of times I will, and we'll talk about the appeals process later on. Like, I'll still start an appeal if they don't have it in writing, but it certainly makes it a lot easier to do so. And the eligibility depends on a few things, such as assets, their income, and their status with residency in Ontario, which we'll talk a bit about later. And there may be other rules which may be open to interpretation or challenge. So applying for ODSP, there's 2 points where I'm applying for ODSP. There's a financial eligibility, and then there's a medical eligibility. So they look at the financial eligibility first before they start the medical eligibility process. So most ODSP clients are on Ontario Works before applying, and if they financially apply for OW, they're automatically going to financially apply for ODSP. So usually when they're applying for OW and the intent is to apply for ODSP, you let the caseworker know, and then the OW caseworker will send out a medical package for the doctor to fill out. There may be times where the assets and income that someone gets on OW might be different than someone that's on ODSP. You can have more assets, you can have more income when you're on ODSP. So you might run into a case where someone may not be eligible for OW due to assets or income, but they may be eligible for ODSP. If that's the case, then they would contact ODSP directly, and OW may ask them to contact them directly. And then it'll be ODSP that sends out the medical package. So in terms of applying for ODSP with the medical eligibility, now this is a whole big topic. I'm only going to touch on it briefly in this presentation. I mean, if people want to have me back and we can talk about the medical eligibility aspect, you know, I have a presentation prepared for that as well. But basically what will happen is once they start to apply for ODSP, the ODSP will send out what's called a disability determination package, and that needs to be filled out by their medical professional. And so the definition of a person with a disability in the ODSP Act is that they have a substantial physical or mental impairment that is continuous or recurrent and expected to last at least 1 year. And that substantial impairment results in substantial restrictions in their daily living. So that's ability to manage their personal care, their ability to function in a workplace or function in a community. So those are pretty broad, and it's a lower standard than things like applying for CPP disability, because it's meant to, you know, provide even for temporary disabilities, provided that temporary disability is expected to last at least a year. And just the federal definition that's in CPP is a much higher level of disability. Some people can qualify for ODSP without filling out one of these things. So that would be someone that's been approved for CPP disability. So sometimes we see, I mean, CPP disability is based on what you've paid into the system. So if you have someone that's working, that had been working, they do apply for CPP, but they're getting less than they would get for ODSP, then they ought, because that's that higher standard, they automatically will qualify for ODSP, and then they'll get the difference between what they were getting on CPP and ODSP. And then there'll be other benefits that are available to people on ODSP that aren't necessarily available to people on CPPD. Also, if they qualify for services for those who are developmentally disabled, then once again they're kind of grandfathered into ODSP. So this is one of those slides that I'm talking about that is Toronto specific. So if you're in Toronto and you have a client that is homeless and on Ontario Works, you may wish to connect them with the HOPE program. So I forget what HOPE stands for, and I couldn't find it online, but those are the main criteria for the program. So basically, this is extra assistance provided in that process of applying for ODSP. Lots of times what we see, especially for people that are homeless, precariously housed, is they don't have regular access to medical care. They can kind of help with filling out that application or providing that additional medical information to back up the application. And what the HOPE workers through Ontario Works will do is they'll try to connect them with doctors, and they can even connect them with a psychiatrist that will be able to complete a psychological assessment for them. If someone's already in the ODSP process, they still may be able to become eligible for the HOPE program. I would still reach out, because it's important to get, you know, that, especially if they need a kind of fast track to a psychiatrist for an assessment, then that's something that you might want to connect them with. So there's 8 HOPE workers across Toronto. They're located out of the Wesley Place, the North York, Yonge and Eglinton, Beaches, Scarborough Village, and Dufferin offices. They serve all of Toronto, and they can accept referrals from any Toronto OW office, even if they're not in one of those areas. And specifically, it's kind of housed at Wellesley Place, which is downtown, and they have 3 psychiatrists that work with Wellesley Place. So, yeah, and it says like they can get connected with the HOPE program right away, but it may take around a month for them to see a psychiatrist. But I really, if you're helping someone apply for ODSP, it's really important to get that, and you think a psych assessment is needed, it's really important to connect them so they can get that before the application is submitted, because after the application is submitted, if they don't have a psych, even if it's turned down, when an ODSP application is turned down, they kind of look back at when ODSP made the decision to deny them benefits. So say they looked over your application and they decided on May 30th the person was not disabled. What you'll have to prove in your appeal is, were you disabled on that specific date? So if you don't get a psych assessment for someone until like months after that date, then the tribunal is not going to give as much credence to it, because they'll say, well, this was done after the date of decision. We can't really determine what was happening at the date of decision. So being able to get as much information in the initial ODSP application is really important. So here's a contact for the HOPE program, Francesca Assetti. She's kind of runs the program out of Wellesley Place. So if you're having any problems connecting with one of the local offices, or you're in an area with a client there, their local office doesn't have a HOPE worker, then I would give her a call. Here's some contact information for her. And as I said, I'm not sure about other jurisdictions if they have something similar, but the HOPE program is Toronto specific. So in terms of assets, so you can have some things when you're applying for OW or ODSP. So on OW, a single person can have up to 10,000 worth of assets. A couple can have up to 15,000 worth of assets, and 500 for each dependent they have. For ODSP, someone can have up to 40,000 as a single person, 50,000 as a couple, and 500 for each dependent. So this is what I was saying before, where like if someone say they have $20,000 worth of assets, they might not be eligible for OW, they may be eligible for ODSP. And in that case, you might want to get them to apply right to ODSP. So there's certain things that people can have that don't count as part of that assets limit. First is their primary residence. So if they own their home, their condo, that is an exempt asset, as is the first vehicle. They can have a second vehicle if it's worth less than 15,000 and is required for someone else on the benefit unit, such as a spouse or child, to get to work. Things like personal property, they're not concerned with. They're not going to make you sell your television because you're applying for Ontario Works. Things that are tools of the trade for work. So that might be things like, you know, sometimes that even includes the second vehicle. It might include more assets as well. Money, if there's have money set aside in a trust, this is a whole other topic on its own. I can provide you more information if you're interested, but it's subject to regulations on terms of the type of trust, things like that. Something you might run into working with people with disabilities is a Henson Trust. And a Henson Trust is a trust set up for people with disabilities to kind of shield some of their assets and make them and not affect their ability to receive benefits or and not have that count towards asset limits for rent geared to income housing. They can have an RRSP as long as it's locked in. So they're going to be looking at, are those assets liquid? Once again, there's a whole kind of page of qualifications. I know the constituency that we're serving in this presentation aren't going to probably have much of that. Same with registered educational savings plans, whether for them or any of their children. And last is a registered disability savings plan. I really suggest that people look into encouraging their clients to look into having a registered disability savings plan. You need to qualify through getting the disability tax credit. But if you do, the government will not only match contributions to an RDSP, you also get $1,000 a year as long as it's open in the RDSP. So it's a way to, I mean, like it's a way to, you know, save money, even the little bit that people have. Like I have friends that put in even $10, $20 a month when they can here or there. The government's going to match that. And it kind of comes out of things too. Like, I mean, we had a case at our clinic many years ago where a woman that was on ODSP was saving up all of her, and this was at the height of the Harris years when there was a lot of crackdown, especially on single mothers, in terms of criminalization of accepting social assistance. There was a woman that came to our clinic. She'd been, all of her like tax benefits, her baby bonus, like those sort of things that she was getting, she was putting in aside in a savings account for her child who was also disabled. ODSP found this at some point, and not only did they issue a huge overpayment, I believe there was also fraud charges based on that. But that's why we have things like a registered disability savings plan. You know, it shields those assets. So here are the current rates for Ontario Works. Anyone that has worked with clients in this sector, and the first thing that stands out is how woefully inadequate these rates are. You can see a single person has the $343 for their basic needs, and then of that is $390 for shelter. And then I'm not going to read all of these off, the slides will be available, but you can see these are the rates that someone would get on Ontario Works. So for ODSP, a bit more. We're looking at, instead of $733, a single person can get $1,308. One of the things that stands out to me, if there's more than 2 children, there isn't really extra funding for that. That's something that always seems unfair to me as well. If someone is, when we look here, when we see a couple where one is disabled, so, and this is another thing that comes up as well quite often in our office, is that if, I think it's after 3 months of cohabitation, it's expected that the non-disabled partner is going to be supporting the disabled partner. So that's why it's listed as this. So you get a little bit more money if your spouse is on that, not a whole lot, as you can see, but then yeah, all of their income is going to be treated as your income. And this runs into issues too, where in my opinion, and the opinion of other people in this field, this really increases the risk of family violence, where a disabled person does not have their own income. It makes it harder to leave a situation. It puts them in a lot more vulnerability. And often we get, poor people don't necessarily, when they split up, hire divorce lawyers to split up their assets, right? So often we will get cases where ODSP is claiming that someone is still married, they don't believe that the couple is split up, they're insisting that they get a divorce. I have to try to explain to them that, poor people can't afford divorce lawyers. And while there's limited certificates available, a lot of lawyers won't even take that on, because they'll say, well, there's no point in doing this divorce because you don't have any assets. I'm not even going to bother to assist you with this. So it is a huge issue, and just access to family law in general is a huge issue. We can see here where a couple is both disabled, so this is where they've both been adjudicated as having a disability. Once again, it's expected to share that, so they can get $2,205. I think there's like a little bit more they can get if their shelter is a bit more, but it's still woefully inadequate. So you notice in that thing, I broke down the basic needs as well as the shelter allowance. So shelter allowance can include rent, it can include heating and utility costs, it can include mortgage payments, property taxes, occupancy costs under an agreement to purchase, insurance premiums for dwelling and contents. And this is one that I think is important to point out, because most often if people are in private housing, just going back here, you're not going to find shelter that's under $556. But if you're in rent geared to income housing, it could be $100. But you don't get the difference between that. You just get what you're paying for shelter. So Something I would talk to your clients about is if they're paying under that 556, about signing up for tenants insurance. And tenants insurance is important. Some landlords require it. I'm not sure if TCH, the other social housing ones, do, but even then, I mean, it can go a long way towards protecting their contents, protecting their, if there's catastrophic repairs that need to be done. So I would, and that can be covered by OW and ODSP. So talk to your clients about that. Now, and this is the big point that I kind of wanted to raise, is if someone is homeless, so that's either they're in a street, on the streets, or in the shelter, they're not paying any housing costs, they're not going to receive the shelter portion of their check. So going back again, you're only going to get $752 if you're on ODSP. You're only going to get $343 if you're on OW. And that, once again, it keeps people locked in a cycle. They can't save up to get first and last towards a housing, even if that is something they can afford. Another thing is, a lot of clients I've dealt with in the past, they might be living in the shelters, but they may have storage units to keep their belongings from when they were evicted or when they became homeless. Storage costs do not count towards shelter portion. It's only your living costs. So there's been a bunch of cases that we've tried through the clinic system, and time and time again, the tribunal, the OW, ODSP, and the tribunal have found that that storage costs do not make it eligible for shelter funding. And last, if someone receives an abatement of rent, just say they go to the landlord and tenant board, their roof has been leaking for 12 months, the landlord and tenant board might award an abatement of rent going back to whenever that started, and then continuing till that is fixed. If that's the case and they receive an abatement of rent, then they need to report that to ODSP. And if their shelter for that time period falls under the max shelter allowance, then they're gonna incur either an overpayment or reduced costs for that period of time. All right, so this is another thing that is important. And one of the things I really wanted to bring up in the presentation is how incarceration affects someone's eligibility for social assistance. So a person is not eligible for income support while they are detained in what is ODSP terms a lawful place of confinement. A lawful place of confinement can include federal penitentiary, provincial facilities, an open custody facility, secure custody facilities, and municipal lockup. So basically, if someone goes in the middle of the month, say that they're going to municipal lockup, they're arrested, and they are in there for, let's say, 6 weeks. So if they come in the middle of the month, say they're arrested May 15th, then they will have their check deducted both for the basic needs and the shelter portion for the time that they are detained, and they will not receive social assistance for the time they're detained. Now, say that they're getting out in a month, say, but they're not going to get out till like the 5th of the month. So they'll give you the shelter for that entire month when you're being released, but your other benefits, so most likely the basic needs, if you're getting special diet, other things, that will be reduced for the time that you're in there, but you will get the shelter, but that's only on the month that you are released. And as I said, good luck finding housing if they're not paying for your housing for the few months that you're in there, and then, so it's a bit misguided. So where someone is incarcerated part-time, so say that they're serving weekends, they'll get the full shelter allowance for the month, but their basic needs, other benefits will be reduced on a prorated basis. So if they're in 8 days a month, then they'll get it reduced, just that basic needs or the special diet, that other portion. So if someone's on a temporary absence, parole, or probation, and they're serving a conditional sentence, and they're in a community residence funded in whole or part by Correctional Service Canada, they're not eligible for the full basic needs nor the full shelter allowance, but they may be eligible for up to $149 a month for what they term personal needs. This next one is for ODSP only. From the rules that I could determine, is if someone is transferred to a psychiatric facility for the purpose of a court-ordered assessment, they're eligible for income support only for the time that they're in that psychiatric facility. Once they go back to a correctional facility, then that would cease. But if they're going to be put in a place that's a psychiatric facility that's also a place of confinement, then they're ineligible. And the example they gave was the St. Lawrence Valley Correctional and Treatment Unit. I'm not as familiar with all of those, but there is a list that they have. One other thing I forgot to put in here for incarceration. So if somebody is, for Ontario Works, if somebody is exiting the program 10 days before they are to be released, they can call Ontario Works and set up an application so they can be sure to start receiving benefits when they leave incarceration. All right, so this is just a little bit about ODSP for children. So if they're not receiving the child tax benefit for whatever reason, they can get this transitional child benefit, which is up to $230 for each eligible child. Child support payments are fully exempt as income, which has only been since 2017, I believe. And assistance for children with severe disabilities, so they can receive additional support up to $455 if they have disabilities, and there's other qualifications for that as well. Okay, so that's kind of okay. And the other thing, I should put a slide about this. When we go back and we talk about children, we're looking at dependents as well. So dependent can include, people under 18. It can include someone who is in school and is still, like living at home. Actually, no, they can do it if they're not living at home as well, if they're away at school, provided they're still working on their first degree, and for 5 years out of high school, they can be considered a dependent. They can also elect to have their own into Ontario Works, but if they'll look at some of they may not be eligible depending for their own Ontario Works if they haven't determined that they're financially independent from their parents. Okay, so in terms of other benefits, this is just as important to my clients sometimes as receiving the money. There's other things that are available, and there's two types of benefits. So first are mandatory benefits. So these are ones that are available across Ontario. And if OW or ODSP says no to some of these mandatory benefits, then you can appeal all the way to the Social Benefits Tribunal, and your funding is dependent on your needs. So there's also discretionary benefits, and this is where they differ depending on the municipality. And this is why, like I said, most of what I'm going to be talking about is Toronto specific. So if you're outside of Toronto, then you may check with the local legal clinic to you if you have some questions about discretionary benefits. Usually with the discretionary benefits, if they're turned down, usually the city will have its own kind of internal review system for that. But if you still disagree, then you can't go to the Social Benefits Tribunal to get that. I should have had this slide first, but yeah. So in terms of this, going back to qualifying again for immigration status, so people that are refugee claimants, they're eligible from the date the claim is made, even if they're still pending a decision on eligibility for referral to the IRB. Visitors, I use this in quotation marks a lot of the times, they're not eligible unless they've made a claim or application for status. So that might be a humanitarian and compassion application. And deportees may not be eligible, but it really depends on the case, and it's really specific to this. So this is another one where I talked at the beginning about why it's important to get stuff in writing, because lots of times people may have murky immigration status and they talk to OW, and OW or ODSP is just like, go away, you don't get it, too bad, so sad. This is where you want that in writing, because there's lots of times where the decisions an OW make are not necessarily the decisions that the tribunal is going to make. For example, with respect to visitors, the tribunal takes a pretty broad view of like what is a visitor versus what is someone who's trying to establish their life here. So lots of times the legal clinic can make arguments that they should be eligible by proving, that they were looking for work, that they've established themselves in the community, all of these things that are not, that prove that they're trying to build a life here. They're not necessarily a visitor, even though that's how they're being coded by ODSP or OW. And I've seen some things recently that's been really frustrating where, I had like a whole family that they've made, they were a Roma refugee family. They all had their refugee claims accepted. And then after years of being on to Ontario Works, they just said that they're visitors. They just put in something from IRCC. It just says that they were visitors. OW couldn't confirm how they come to this decision. They weren't accepting the completed refugee claims that I was able to provide to them, because just something in their computer was coding them as visitors. And we were luckily able to solve that before it went to a full hearing. But yeah, this whole area of immigration status and social assistance is very complicated, and we can do, if you're interested and you want to contact our clinic, we can do presentations just on this. But don't accept them just saying verbally that someone is ineligible, is basically the takeaway from that. All right, so going back to benefits again, a big one that people will get is the special diet allowance. So there's a whole list of conditions. You can look up the schedule online. It includes things like HIV, high blood pressure, obesity, things like celiac. There's a whole bunch of different things that people might be eligible for, to get up to $250 a month per person for special diet. If someone's pregnant or nursing, it's a bit separate, but they can get a nutritional allowance for that. What was I going to say about the special diet? It's another point I was going to make, but obviously I forgot. Yeah, I guess I just don't. It's on the onus is on the client to get the application, get their doctor to fill it out, and turn it back. So another big thing is a drug benefit card. So the drug benefit card will cover most of the prescription medications listed under the ODB formulary. They used to have like a paper card you'd have to bring every month, but now they can just use their OHIP at the pharmacy to confirm if they're eligible for ODB. If they don't have an OHIP card, then they can still issue that paper drug card. If there is medication that's not listed under the ODB, then ask the doctor about filling out the exceptional access plan. They may do that. That's kind of separate from ODSP. It follows the same kind of formula as people that are qualifying for Trillium benefits. Dental benefits are another thing. So all ODSP recipients, their spouses, and dependent children from ages 0 to 17 are eligible for dental benefits. Now, not everything is covered. It's kind of spotty, but the Ontario Dental Association and Ministry of Child and Social Services have negotiated what's covered. the dentist can write to request to cover treatment if it's not on the schedule if it's related to a person's disability. So for OW dental coverage, there's no mandatory dental coverage for OW recipients. Children may be covered for healthy smiles, and adults on OW may be eligible for emergency dental assistance. This is discretionary, and this also goes if there is an ODSP dependent, so someone that's older than 17, they may get emergency dental assistance through Ontario Works. And Ontario Works will sometimes do that too for prescription costs as well. So for vision benefits, ODSP recipients and members of a benefit unit, except dependent adults, they receive coverage for purchase every 3 years and repair of lenses or frames. And children can receive new lenses every time a prescription changes. Adults on OW, once again, this is one of those discretionary benefits you need to talk to your caseworker about, and it varies depending on the municipality. So another thing we have is the mandatory special necessities form. This is available to both people on ODSP and OW. So ODSP recipients ask for the MSM form from your worker, and usually OW recipients will just need a letter from their doctor. So this can cover certain things such as diabetic supplies. Now, with diabetic supplies, that's only for diabetic supplies that aren't covered from another place. So they're expected to search out support from the Canadian Diabetes Association, the Assisted Devices Program. And sometimes things are covered by the drug card, such as test strips. I believe blood glucose, like the continuous glucose monitors, like the Libra or the Dexcom, I believe they are now covered under the Ontario Drug Plan. So I don't think you would get additional for that. But that's important. Diabetic supplies can really add up very quickly. Surgical supplies and dressings, if that's prescribed by a physician as a result of surgical, radiological, or medical procedure or disease, and then necessary medical transportation. So a lot of times people will think, they come to me being like, well, I should get, thinking that they'll get like a Metro Pass or something similar if they're on ODSP. It's a bit more complicated than that, and it's a bit onerous to kind of cover. But basically, they can get, if a cost for transit is more than $15 a month, then OW or ODSP can cover transport to appointments with health professionals. So that would be doctors, counselors, anything else, physiotherapists, any medical appointments that they might have. And they'll need to get their doctor to confirm how many times a month they're going and perhaps provide proof of that. This can also be transportation to attend Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, similar groups, mental health programs. Usually that only refers to therapy or counseling that's been prescribed by a doctor. But I recently saw a case that came through the tribunal where someone had been trying to get funding to attend more like peer groups, and the tribunal found in their favor. So once again, if someone's denied that and it's something that they really need, contact your local community legal clinic. Emergency costs, so things like ambulance, or if someone is driving someone to an emergency situation, that may be covered with receipts. All right. So another thing we have is the extended health benefit. If someone's income is higher than the ODS, if they were on ODSP previously and then they start getting CPP or OAS, GIS, that sort of thing, or they start working, and their monthly health costs is added up with ODSP is greater than what they'd be getting with their other source of income, then they may be eligible to continue receiving those other benefits. And that can also include the special diet. It's important that, when someone's exiting the program, their caseworker is supposed to connect with them and assess them for this. Most often they do not, and people are not aware of this. So they're going to be losing access to some important things. and they must apply within 30 days of receiving their last ODSP income support. So be on the lookout if someone is exiting the program to connect around this. So discretionary benefits. So these are the ones that are going to be kind of decided and completed for the cities. So this might include prosthetic appliances, although some of that is covered through the assistive device program, cost of completing other medical forms, air conditions for people with severe medical conditions. It basically has to, in Toronto at least, it has to be at the point where the doctor writes a letter saying this person will die if they don't have an air conditioner. I mean, it's in everyone's best interest to not have to deal with the 90+ degree heat that we deal with sometimes, but that's not what they're looking at. And some funeral.
Randy, sorry,
Yes.
Randy, this is Dominica. I just want to say we have about 10 more minutes left and we want to leave some time for question and answer. Just wanted to flag that.
Okay, I'm going to move quickly through this then. Thank you. You can refer to that. That doesn't come up very often. So this is something that, this is a Toronto specific program that is important to know about. This is the Housing Stabilization Fund. So OW or ODSP may provide assistance to give someone last month's rent to secure safe and affordable housing. Once again, they're responsible for providing their own first month's rent. Rent arrears to prevent eviction, stuff to for paying outstanding bills, essential furniture when they're moving into a place, or soft furniture if destroyed by bed bugs. Once again, this is a city specific program, so it's, if they're having problems accessing it, call your local legal clinic. Just going to look and see what I'm going to move very quickly then for the next part, just a little bit. I mean, this isn't going to apply as much to us, but just in case someone is working, there's a couple things to keep in mind. So if they're on Ontario Works, for the first 3 months, sorry, I didn't put it in there, first 3 months, 100% of any income they receive, they will take. After that, the first 200 is exempt, and then it's 50% on the dollar after that. Now for ODSP, there's been a bit of change. Now someone can keep, and this is only for earnings. This is only if for work income. They get to keep the first $1,000, and then after that, 75% is subtracted, and that only applies to the person that's disabled. So if there's a spouse, then it's the same rules as OW. And if they have anyone, if they're a full-time student, if there's anyone else who's a full-time student, they have that exempt. This is important. There may have other forms of income, and they are 100% deductible. So this would include most WSIB payments, CPP and CPPD, employment insurance, and OAS. This is really important because people logically make the assumption that different forms of government talk to one another. They don't. So if you have someone that's approaching 65, ODSP will send them a letter saying, hey, apply for OAS, GIS, and then they never follow up until 3 years later. And then they find, oh, you should have told us that you are now getting the benefit we told you to get, and now you owe $20,000. So make sure that if you have people approaching that they're aware of that. Yeah, so last thing, if you disagree with any decision OW is made, so this is being denied benefits, being cut off of benefits entirely, you have to submit an internal review within 30 days of when that decision was made, and then they have 30 days to answer. Most of the time they uphold their own decisions. From there, you're going to be applying to the Social Benefits Tribunal, and a third-party adjudicator is going to be making that decision. So just overall tips and tricks, know about the benefits available, get people to keep in writing and ask for a copy of everything, pay attention to time limits, especially about those appeals, keep letters, bank statements, work stubs, all of that, make records about conversations, and get stuff in writing. And that's my very whirlwind tour to the world of OW and ODSP.
Thank you, Randy. Very, very informative. There is a few questions that we do have in the chat. I am going to scroll back a bit just to find it quickly.
And Dane, I just want to say, anyone who hasn't turned off their video, it'll be part of the recording. So if
I think
somebody
there's
does
just
not want,
one.
yeah, if somebody does not want to be part of the video recording, if you could turn off your video, that would be great.
So we have a question here. And it was basically in the middle of the presentation. It says, can folks living in an encampment receive shelter allowance? Living in a, and then they're just basically stating facts in regards to living in a tent can be quite expensive. And is the shelter they are living in, the cost of the tent, a tarp, a cooler with ice to use their fridge, their stove, barbecue, and propane, etc.
No. So that's not some of the housing costs that are covered. I believe that similarly, there is a human rights case right now in another province where they're challenging this. But currently, no, those don't count as housing costs. I mean, it would be an interesting, if you have someone, it might be something that legal clinics would be interested in taking on as a test case, but as it stands, no.
Yeah. I think, thanks for answering that. I think straightforwardly, like, it's not, but I think advocacy behind that is definitely needed because that is the reality of what is happening right now. The other question is, would you have to reapply for special diet, etc. again upon release? So I guess if you were previously approved.
Yeah, so someone's, I guess, upon release, so they were getting it, they've been incarcerated, and now they're coming out again. I guess it depends on how long they've been incarcerated for. Usually the doctor has to fill in the special diet form once a year. So it just depends.
Yeah, I think that's from my understanding, if it doesn't expire before a year, but then also like if you're changing workers, changing locations, I think all those factors would have to be also added in regards to applying again. But technically they shouldn't have to apply again if they've already been approved and the special diet has not expired, unless there's other details pertaining to worker location and all of that.
Yeah.
And then I would just literally talk about the fact that they were already approved. So, and use that as a
I think it depends on how long they've been incarcerated.
Yeah.
And how long the special diet form was filled out ago.
So the next question we have is, how would inmates know they can apply from jail 10 days before they are to be released? Do they have to speak to social worker in jail or the release planner? Is there a system whereby staff come to them to see if they need that?
To be honest, I'm not sure. I don't personally deal a lot with incarcerated clients. I think as long as they have access, they can call that 1-888 number that's now a provincial-wide central intake. Would be my understanding.
So I do have someone in the audience that we know that's very close to us. So, she's also about a part of Scarborough. So Melissa, I believe, can answer that. I have an answer too, but go ahead, Melissa, and if you could give an answer to that question.
Yeah, for most part, inmates do not know that they can apply within the 10 days. However, for obviously us educated people working with people who are incarcerated, we do advise them, and I've done it several times with my clients. It is a quicker process.
Yeah, and I think too, they have social workers, right? So, well, I know that they have social workers. Yeah.
Yeah, social workers, discharge planners, release planners, reintegration workers, anyone who is informed on the process when we're working with our clients, setting them up for community reintegration of any sort. Generally, you know, financial is typically a problem when someone's been incarcerated for a long period of time. Most do not have an employment option ready to go as soon as they get released. So they may need some temporary financial assistance. So we do try and do our best to get that done, but that's only if they have a set discharge date. If they do not have a set discharge date, then they cannot do that process. So anyone on remand who is looking to go to court and may get released from court, but they're not sure if they're going to get released, they actually can't do the process and they have to do it once they're released from custody.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank
Melissa.
you for that, Melissa.
So another question we have is, can a doctor refuse to complete the application package?
Yeah. I mean, doctors can refuse to do a lot of things. There isn't, I mean, you might get into like human rights law at that point. But like, as far as I'm aware, there's nothing legally stopping them for refuse to do that. I mean, honestly, if I know it's easier said than done in terms of getting medical support. In Scarborough, we have a large newcomer community that does not have very good access to medical care. But I think if you're dealing with a doctor that's refusing or acting in that way, they're not going to do a good job at filling out the application anyway. So at that point, you might want to do some advocacy and try to find, I know, once again, needle in a haystack stuff, but try to find better medical care. Always look at your community health centers, and your family health teams in your area are always good. I find that they take much more of a social determinants of health background, and they'll be more used to working with people on disabilities, instead of a random walk-in doctor that doesn't even speak the language that your client speaks and refuses to really investigate much for them.
Hi.
And that's a whole other thing. I would, if people are interested, like I can do a whole presentation on the medical qualifications for ODSP, but that's like a whole nother hour topic in and of itself. But like I said, that's 90% of my job.
Thanks, Randy. So there is a question in the audience. I'll just get that quickly. And just a reminder, the link is in the chat for the evaluation. While we're going through this, because of time, can you guys please click on that link and fill that out? Paz, I believe, can you go ahead and ask your question?
Hi there, thank you so much. I ran into this issue about 4 or 5 months ago with one of my clients. They had a lot of chronic issues. We were trying to get some documentation filled out by their family practitioner. The family practitioner asked the client to pay $300 out of pocket, as opposed to going to like through the ministry or getting paid out for completing the form for the government. They also refused to transfer the documents over to any other doctor. I was just wondering, what are you supposed to do in that situation where the doctors
were they asking to, the medical information you were trying to get, was it to fill out the initial ODSP application?
It was either to fill it out and have the doctor fill it out, or to have all the medical records transferred to another doctor when I felt it was unreasonable for the.
I mean, they're being paid, they get paid by the ministry to fill out the disability determination package. So if that's something they're doing, they're double dipping, and that's illegal. In terms of like transferring files to other doctors, I mean, they can charge for that. Like my whole clinic, we have 11 grand a year that we can pay for disbursements. That's across all of our departments, not just social assistance, but we regularly have doctors that want $500 to fill out a form, you know, and like a lot of that is just advocacy. It's like arguing with them. It's like but then it gets difficult too, because like you don't want to necessarily jeopardize that relationship that someone might have with their medical provider, even if I think they're being an unreasonable dick, you know? So it's tricky. That I don't think there's an easy answer for that.
But
hey, Dana, we're over time right now. So, and I know there's several other questions as well. It sounds like everybody's it's a, people are very interested in this topic. I just want to just let people know that we're over time.
Yeah, so we do have some of the questions in the chat. We could forward it over to Randy. I did put in there that the slides will be provided after the fact to all the participants. And yeah, I don't want to keep you guys probably have to jump into another meeting like myself. But that being said, thank you guys all for attending. Randy, thank you for this informative presentation. We'll always have questions in regards to this.
Yeah.
We'll
I'm
also
gonna put
provide his information.
my email in the chat.
Yeah, and we'll also provide your email and information to everyone. So if you guys have direct questions, you can contact him directly. Just a quick overview. He does work for Scarborough Community Legal Center, so you can reach him there as well.
Yeah, and also if you have like specific questions about like specific files or specific clients you're working with, contact the community legal clinic closest to you. Specifically when we're getting into those things that might be like municipally focused, and they usually have more direct, like I have relationships with the local offices, so do everyone in their own area. So I would contact the local community legal clinic too for support. And we're always willing to do presentations as well. So if you want us to do presentations for your local agency, particularly if you're Scarborough or Toronto based, give us a shout. We also, in community legal clinics, we provide legal assistance in the areas of housing law, social assistance law, immigration, and employment law are the big four. Sometimes some do WSIB as well. My colleague Kevin, who's a housing lawyer with our clinic, he's going to be doing a presentation on housing law in
so there is just a burning question that someone is asking to answer. Why ODSP refuses to assist with glasses for clients who are incarcerated? I could understand the other hold on financial benefits, but visual aid is a human right. Thanks.
Yeah. No, once again, I mean, they're not entitled to any benefits when they're incarcerated. And this is just it's a juggling act, right? It's like each kind of government department, like pushing stuff off onto other government departments so they don't have to. And that's just kind of the way that all of our laws involving poor people work.
So apologies that we're unable to answer all the questions. We see the questions in the chat. We'll forward it over to Randy and we'll have him follow up with that with you guys. And then also, again, if you guys will provide his contact information. So if you have any questions, you could ask him directly. And then, yeah. So thank you guys again all for coming.
Thank you so much for attending.
Thank you, Randy, for presenting. Very informative, a lot of questions. This is something that is very needed through the work that we do and working with the clients. It is a difficult avenue to navigate, not just for workers, but like I could imagine just for clients itself. Like it's always good to put hands on and walk them through this directly because it's so there's so much barriers in place and it's very confusing if you don't have the right support. So yeah, thanks again for coming and presenting, and thank you guys all for attending.
Cheers. Have a good afternoon, guys.